And on today's show, why financial planning doesn't work. Part one of this week's series on the new prosperity economics with registered investment advisor, Kim Butler. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician in Innsmark. Let's get down to business. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Hello, Steve.
Wow, I'm telling you, I just kind of perused your book before we started the prepping for the show. You have 3 books out. They're all on Amazon.com. The first one is Busting the Retirement Lies. Just these, you know, they're inflammatory, these titles. And then the next one is Busting the Financial Planning Lies, which I find to be, it could be all this week. We might get a little bit of hate mail. And then on top of that, Live Your Life Insurance, which I thought was a really great. It's an old approach with a kind of a new twist, and yet just redux something that's been around forever. You wrote these 3 books. Now, I want to tell everybody about, before we talk a little bit about the books, I want to talk a little bit about Kim's background. I mean, she is one of the new leaders. This is kind of a movement now, this new prosperity movement. It's kind of something new, and it's somewhat controversial because we're taking old ideas, traditional ideas of financial planning, and we're kind of doing away with them. Am I hearing that correct?
That is correct.
And you were a CFP, you were licensed Series 7, Series 65, you had a practice, and all of a sudden you walked into what you call this delusionary moment in your life where it didn't work for you anymore. Talk a little bit about this whole transition and how did you come to this revelation?
Well, it really came about because time after time I was showing a financial plan to a client. And so here we go, I put this information in front of them and it's wrong. It's mathematically correct. I mean, the computer got it right, the information was correct, all the analysis was correct, but it didn't have anything to do with their life and their financial life. And so we are looking at these things called financial plans, which people are making decisions on, and they're incorrect and they're misleading, and it's giving people a false sense of peace of mind, and I'm not okay with that.
Well, let's just go back here. You said if the math is right, then what's wrong? I mean, we inputted it, the computer's software did what they were supposed to do. We generated the numbers. If the math is right, what's wrong with it? The plan.
The math is right, but it has nothing to do with our lives because we make assumptions with the math. So we might assume an interest rate, we might assume an investment rate, we might assume a tax rate, we might assume even how long somebody's going to live. And all these things go into this plan that are based on assumptions where then the math is accurate, but it has nothing to do with our lives and our money and the way that we're going to use that money in our lives.
Well, give me one example of that.
Perfect. So let's look at a qualified plan. We're going to say if you put X dollars in over a period of time, if you get this particular interest rate, and if tax rates are this. So right there's a red flag because we know tax rates are going to change. Well, if, then you're going to have X dollars in the future. And our statements even prove that. When we look at the statement of a qualified plan, we see a number at the bottom. But the problem is that number doesn't take into account the taxes, and the taxes are in the future at an unknown rate. So the computer has assumed the rate, but it's all guesswork. And then we as human beings and advisors go make decisions on that wrong information. And that's where the false sense of peace of mind comes from.
Okay, so your premise, if I'm hearing correctly, is, hey, we're making guesstimations at best. That's what I'm hearing you suggest. And those guesstimations really don't have anything to do with history because we've seen already in history rates change, crediting interest rate or crediting for whatever stock return we're getting. All that has changed. It wasn't what we thought it was going to be. And now we're talking about taxes. And I didn't even hear you saying Social Security taxes, which could be a whole nother issue. So as a CFP, if you were a CFP for a long time and you walked away from it and became a registered investment advisor, and how do we overcome, I think most of our audience, their heart is right. We're trying to do the right thing for the client.
Absolutely.
We're putting in assumptions that we think are reasonable. I remember just 10 years ago, 6% on my portfolio was reasonable. Now we're down to 4, and they're starting to say that might not be big enough.
3.
We might be at 3.
Right.
So we keep changing the rules of engagement because the environment changes around it. We're kind of living in an economic relativism. There's no real absolutes to hang our hat on. That's what I hear you kind of griping about.
That's right.
All right, so you have a huge history. You're not some Johnny-come-lately coming onto the scene. You go ahead and you turn in your entire thinking on financial planning. I mean, your books These books are controversial. If you go out to Amazon.com, you can pick up these books. The actual site is on the lower, and Kim's giving away, for the show, if you want to see it, the first 100 pages of Busting Financial Planning Lies. So if you're going to say, Steve, I want to read that book, she'll give you the first 100 pages. Just go ahead on the bottom of the screen. They'll show you the actual ULR address, and go ahead and order it from there. And thank you for that. When you're looking at this is a hard thing. You're a very detailed person. You're very analytic, and now all of a sudden you're kind of leaving everything you've ever learned behind. What was that like?
I had to go back to all our clients and say, the information that I told you about maxing out your qualified plan is not correct. The information that I told you about overfunding this education plan or prepaying your mortgage is not correct. And there were things that I had learned that I professionally thought were the best thing to suggest to the client, but they were not right. And it was a tough thing to do, but it was totally worth it. It made all the difference in the world.
Was that self-discovery though, or did somebody bring you into this?
It was always a team effort. It was a huge input of people, lots of different people that were involved in the change of my thinking. But it really came down to the business owner clients that I had and their ability to say, you know what, I agree with you. I think you're right. I couldn't have put it in so many words, but I've always thought that maxing out my qualified plan didn't make the most sense, or that prepaying my mortgage didn't make the most sense. But my financial advisor told me that I should, and they even proved it numerically. So you have to step back from those numbers sometime and see what's going on with people's lives. And that's why we're busting the financial planning lies, because the lies are out there. They're even proved numerically, and yet they're incorrect.
We come back from the break. We're going to continue this whole idea of why financial planning doesn't work, and especially your definition of what's investing and what's savings. We'll be right back after the break. It's not how much money you make for your clients, it's how much money they get to keep, especially in retirement. But retirement income could cause Social Security benefits to be taxed. One tax advantage alternative is life insurance, designed as a non-modified endowment contract that can generate tax-free income without taxing Social Security benefits. These contracts offer differing funding options depending upon your client's risk tolerance. For more information on how life insurance can be part of your retirement planning, just email me at steve@downtobusiness.tv. Brought to you by Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to our second segment. We're with registered investment advisor Kim Butler. And Kim, it sounds like you want to change the world here. I mean, why financial planning doesn't work. Here's your other book we're talking about, because it kind of germane to what we're using in this segment, Busting the Retirement Lies. And this really talks about some of the things you already brought up on the qualified plan area.
It does. The book is split into two sections. The entire second half is around the qualified plan and the idea of the difference between savings and investing, which we can come back to. But the front part is the fun part, because it has a whole bunch of stories of people that are busting the retirement lies. And what I mean by that is that they're out there living their lives, often still working well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And when people are still working, they're still giving to the world, they're not retired, they're not at home, they're not pinching their pennies, they're out there creating value and doing neat things. And so there's a whole bunch of stories in the book about great examples where we can really make a difference in the world with the money that we have or the money that we don't have, because sometimes we work because we want to work, and sometimes we work because we should work.
When you talk about qualified plans and some of your objections you have, you talk about also not only plans not being adequate enough for life expectancy, but I also noticed that you really gripe about this thing called fee opportunity costs. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So inside a qualified plan, you're paying a fee to the money manager, and they get their money regardless of what's going on. And so that's something that you have to be aware of, that is sucking the value out of the plan. And it doesn't matter. I know the media these days is saying that they're trying to do a better job of getting the fees out there, but they're really not. It's not a line item on our statements. And so opportunity cost is what happens inside that plan when you've paid $1 to your money manager. That dollar is no longer available to be invested inside the plan. And so you have this compounding environment. You not only gave the dollar to the money manager, but that dollar then is uninvested, and so it couldn't earn the rates of returns all throughout the many, many years on into retirement. So you've got fees and you've got opportunity costs, and I go over them in detail inside the Busting Retirement Lies books.
Well, I'm thinking, 2 years ago, they came up with the new 408B2 disclosure. You're supposed to say everything that's in a qualified plan. I noticed that I got more disclosure after the law was invoked and now it's employed, But I also noticed that there's sometimes they're not even putting in the statement of additional information, the SAI report, which is an additional 90 basis points that nobody's ever talking about. So I feel your pain and I agree with your gripe. That's a good idea. Now tell me, what is the difference? Because I'm kind of curious. Investing and versus savings.
Savings.
Yeah.
So when the qualified plan first came forth, it was a 401k savings plan. It was designed to help us save money. Now, to me, saving money is the act that we do that is like a verb where we're putting money aside all the time. Investing money is taking the money that we have saved and trying to grow it bigger. And so we want to be doing both. We need to be saving, which is not only the act of putting money aside, it's also making sure that money cannot go down. So liquid savings, life insurance, cash value, savings accounts, CDs, money markets.
It's a conservative
That's
instrument.
Savings, right.
Okay.
Investing then is what we do once we have saved up money and we're now ready to try to make that money grow. And this is where the advisor can come into play and do a good job. And it's not that they aren't. And it's not that the qualified plan is bad. What the challenge that I'm coming up with is that people only have their qualified plan and they don't understand what's going on with it. And that's not okay. As owners of this money, we need to know where that money is and know what it's doing.
So is this am I hearing you, this is a deliberate two-step process? Savings first?
Yes.
Then I'll look at investments once I've actually conquered this arena.
Yes, very well said.
Okay, so people are actually doing this simultaneously, which is
That's the
synchronous,
problem.
and that's the
Right,
problem.
right.
Okay, well, I'm starting to kind of understand the mechanics of what you're saying. So I'm looking at people who are in regular ERISA plans. It's being pulled out of payroll. They get it. They're taking out of it on the 24-month or the 26. Every month or every pay period, it's coming out. People who are not on that, that are doing this by themselves, maybe self-employed and so forth. They're looking for cash flow, and they're at the end of the month. They're putting their money aside. Your issue is step one, I need to save, if I'm hearing correctly.
Yep.
Number two is then after I've saved, there must be an indicator how much I save before I can now go to the next step, which is invest, right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll talk about it throughout the week. We're going to talk about all these things. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas on the show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? Just hop out to our video archives. And remember, you could be wiser as an educated advisor. I'm Steve Savant. I'll see you tomorrow.